behind the wheel of the Mercedes-AMG GLA45, and I think it's important to break down a real quick behind the scenes of what AMG actually is before we dive into what this car is. Now, AMG, Mercedes-AMG, the cars are special because of the way that they come together in front of you. Each true AMG is hand-built in Affalterbach, Germany by one dude. Now, AMG isn't the only manufacturer to do this, but with company like McLaren doing it, and then also Nissan's GTR manufacturing, it's in pretty elite company. And it goes so far, and they're so good at it, that Aston Martin has decided that it's better for them to stop making their own engines and to have AMG develop and manufacture their engines for them. So that's pretty dang good. And what it really comes down to, and the most special thing for me, is the true AMGs have signed plaques on the engine cover.
Okay, yeah, well thanks Matt for the history
Sorry,
lesson. No, you're good. Yeah, thanks for the history lesson. So let's talk about the engine. So you have a 2-liter twin scroll turbo making about 382 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque. Max power comes on at about 6,500 RPMs, and the torque kind of comes alive between 4,700 and 5,000 RPMs. Yep,
absolutely. The cool thing about this engine, at least in the previous generation, was when Mercedes brought this, there's a mosquito in here, this is what happens when you film B-roll first. When Mercedes brought this engine, specifically in the GLA45 for last gen, it was the most powerful engine per liter that was on sale. Bugatti Chiron, Veyron, Pagani, Koenigsegg, anything else less powerful per liter. Not obviously the most powerful engine, but really cool fact.
Now you can get a more affordable, less powerful GLA35, but again that comes with less power. The interesting thing that they did with this M139 engine was they did a lot of configuration to it to basically just optimize airflow and the cooling mechanisms that take place in the engine bay.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure as we're differentiating the GLA45 versus the GLA35, the turbo, the twin scroll unit, is behind the engine, so between the engine and the firewall in the 45 and in front of the engine in the 35, and I think that helps account for some of that less powerfulness.
Now, new to this generation was the 8-speed dual-clutch transmission, and it's a lot smoother than the old 7-speed that it had in the last generation. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was fortunate enough to actually go to Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama at the Mercedes plant and drive the GLA45 around a little kind of mini autocross track, and that was one of the things where you could tell it was kind of first-gen dual-clutch, and it was just a little stuttery, especially at low speeds, so this has smoothed out a lot of that, and it's really easy to live with. You still get a little bit of chunking at low speeds, but it's so much better.
And then one more thing I want to mention about the engine. I think a big complaint with the first generation was just the amount of turbo lag, and I think that they fixed a majority of the turbo lag, but I still think that a little bit of it is still present. And this comes with the Continental 255 by 35s and 21-inch wheels. They look really impressive. Now you have your all-wheel drive system here. You also have torque vectoring rear diff twin clutch, which can send 100% of the torque to either side.
Yeah, so when we talk about the torque split between your different axles, this is not... Okay, so it sends up to 50% of the engine torque to that rear axle, and then 100% of that 50% can go to one wheel or the other. It's a twin clutch unit, and it actually feels really good. It synthesizes rear wheel drive really, really well, like shockingly well, actually. And it reminds me, it sounds similar to something like an Acura super handling all-wheel drive, but it's not, because the way that Acura synthesizes rear-wheel drive is they overdrive the rear axle, which means for every one rotation that the front wheels make, the rear wheels make like 1.01 rotations. So this does not do that. It uses a twin clutch out the back to synthesize, and it feels fantastic. I don't know exactly the engineering behind it, but it's not super handling, and it works really well. This car dynamically is fantastic.
Now there is a Dynamic Plus package that you can get on this thing, which comes with like 6 different drive modes. There's a master setting that allows you to do controllable drifts, adaptive dampers, the 6-piston caliber brakes. Now, the model that we're testing doesn't have the Dynamic Plus package, but we do have the larger front brakes, and we have 5 different drive modes in here. You have your Comfort, your Snow, your Individual, your Sports, and your Sports Plus.
Yeah, and obviously, the drive modes do what they say. So in Sport Plus,
oh, it sounds so good. The blip at the top, and then you also get some.
It's a good dual clutch.
You get some snap, crackle, and pops too if you stay in a gear, which just sound great. And then the turbo spool is also just a great noise at this thing. This thing makes some phenomenal noises.
Yeah, it's very fun behind the wheel. But let's take a minute, let's swap, and let's talk about some other stuff. All right. Well, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great car to drive. It makes all the right noises.
It's super fun. It doesn't feel heavy either, and I think that's the cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it's got all the luxury, it's got all the tech and all the nice materials, but it doesn't feel super heavy. But let's talk about the way this thing looks. I freaking love the way it looks. White, kind of like pearl paint, Panamericana grille that tells you that it's true AMG. Fantastic looking. What do you think?
Yeah, I really like the way it looks as well. I think it's a hot hatch. I think the rims are a really nice touch. They're 21-inch, so that's kind of unique. You don't usually see that big of a rim on
I love the
car,
wheels on this.
On a car this
size. The wheels are so cool. And they have those like dive planes or canards in the front bumper. It just looks fantastic in this spec.
Yeah, it's got quad exhaust, although it's fake quad, so
yeah.
a ding mark there. You also have a rear spoiler on the back, which looks...
It's massive wing, dude, too.
The wing looks awesome. I think we both really like it.
The only thing that I'll say is this has circular or ovular quad tips, whereas traditionally real AMGs with 63 nomenclature had like trapezoidal or rhombus shaped. So that's just an interesting thing that they've chosen to do. I think actually the last gen GLA45 also had like those squared off tips, so that's a little bit different.
The other thing that I don't necessarily like on the exterior is the plastic cladding. I mean, for a $75,000 car, it's kind of wild that you still get plastic cladding on the outside. But it doesn't.
Mazda's fixed that.
Yeah, Mazda fixed that. Can Mercedes-Benz do it next?
I know.
We'll see.
I know.
Let's talk about the interior.
Yeah, so obviously in any modern car, your experience is dominated by your infotainment system, and this is running MBUX. We could do an entire video on MBUX. We're not going to talk about it because I've covered it in previous videos, but it's nice, it's quick, it's responsive, it does all your stuff. I think the interesting thing to me is just the way that it comes together. This car as tested is $75,000, and when I do this, that does not sound like $75,000 to me. Like some of these plastics and some of this switchgear just feels a little bit cheap, and I understand as the GLA, it's one of the entry-level Mercedes, but this, I don't want to hear that sound from my Mercedes.
Yeah, I think it looks like true Mercedes-Benz normally look, and it looks expensive, but I think some of the build quality materials, once you actually interact with them and touch them, I agree with Matt, it does feel a little bit on the cheap side.
Yeah, I mean, I do like the way that it comes together from an aesthetic perspective. Like this whole thing is just one big screen. That's really nice. I really like the steering wheel, the buttons and the controls there. I don't mind the touchpad to interact with stuff.
Doesn't work that well, but you also have a touch screen, which is nice.
Yeah, there's like 7 different ways you can control it.
So if you don't like it on here, which is really
if you don't
cool.
like the steering wheel, use your finger. If you don't like to touch the screen, use your track. Like there's so many different ways that you can use it. It's really, really nice.
Ambient lighting is also a nice touch in here.
Yeah, you've got either 64, like 156 different colors.
Dual moonroof.
That's awesome.
No pano.
That's awesome. This actually has like a shocking amount of space in here too. Like we're in these Recaros. These are optioned seats. So they're a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter. They pinch you a little bit more in the midsection, but I have plenty of room in the shoulders. Mm-hmm. It actually comes together to be really comfortable as long as you have the dampers eased back into like comfort mode.
Right, and then in the back seats, you actually have a lot of headroom. Where you struggle with room is with the knees.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing I want to talk about up here is just, it's classic Mercedes, but you have your column mounted shifter to get into drive, and I know that everyone that gets in one of these is confused and hates it.
Yeah, I just feel like it doesn't feel authentic or like true by nature to a sports car.
Right.
I think people are just so used to actually, even if it's not a manual transmission, I think they still like having the gear shifter.
It's just a little bit foreign. I mean, we've got manufacturers doing like buttons, we've got dials. This is just, I mean, Mercedes has been doing this for years. Like, this isn't new, but it's not my favorite. And then in terms of trunk space, it's the smallest SUV that they sell. So it's small back there.
Yeah, nothing to write home about.
You can still use it, but it's small. And then I think the last thing that we want to cover is some competition. Now, this is a weird car because as base MSRP, it's like 55 grand. Mm-hmm. As tested, it's just under $75,000, which means there's like nothing else that competes with this thing. The closest thing would be all-wheel drive hot hatch Golf R, which is like 60 to 65% of the cost. So it's like, it's less powerful, but it's also way less expensive. So that's kind of the closest thing. And then when we start to go, I guess, downward in terms of like other hot hatches, you've got your Focus RS, which they don't make anymore. Yeah. But that was like 350 horsepower, and this is like 382. So like nothing really gets that close. You've got your Audi RSQ3, which would be the closest thing, but we don't get that here in North America. Mm-hmm. And then BMW has an X2 with a fairly big tune, so that still is only like 300 horsepower, so it's down almost 100 horsepower on this thing. So this thing kind of does stand on its own. Yeah. So if you have a lot of money and you want a hot hatch, and you want a little pocket rocket like toy, I mean, I guess this is kind of it. Now, the only thing that I'll say, at $75,000 as tested, you're starting to talk about real money with like real other competitors. Like namely, you can get a GLC43. That thing starts at about $60,000, and you can option that thing up with $15K in options and still be this price. And that's rear-wheel drive architecture. That's twin-turbo V6. Like, you can even, if you really wanted to swing it, I mean, you'll not be able to drive this thing off the lot at all, but you could theoretically spend a couple more grand, get to $80,000 in spend, and get yourself a GLC 63 with that 4-liter twin-turbo V6, like the true AMG motor. Yeah, why would you? Which is just insane.
Yeah, it's. I don't see a lot of buyers for this car, but
no, there are some out there.
Yeah, there are some out there.
It's just, I guess the thing that's cool to me is like, it is wildly expensive, but it's also kind of one of a kind. Mm-hmm. 400 horsepower almost, hot hatch. And sure, in Europe you can get an A45S, which is 416 horsepower. So theoretically you could tune this thing. It's the same internals, same engine. So you could tune this thing up to over 400 horsepower pretty reliably, and like nothing else is touching you. Plus the dual clutch is really good. The twin clutch rear diff is fantastic. The dynamics in here are great. The technology is good. I mean, overall, phenomenal car, I think. What do you think?
My final thoughts on this thing is, I love the way it looks. It sounds fantastic. I think it makes all the right noises. It drives really well. But the price tag is just, it's just too expensive for me.
It's so expensive.
I think that you can get as much car for a lot cheaper.
With what?
Like if you got a Golf R and you tuned it, or you bought a Focus RS and you tuned it, I think in terms of like driving dynamics and performance, you can get similar experience for a lot less money. Granted, you don't have the interior luxuries maybe as this Mercedes-Benz, but I don't think anyone buying a hot hatch is really, I think that they would skew more towards a performance versus the interior luxuries. I think that would just be an added bonus.
Yeah, this is like a Golf R owner got a really big raise and just wanted a nicer Golf R. But with that being said, VW just brought their new gen Golf R, and we haven't tested that, and I've been hearing a lot of stuff about that all-wheel drive system. I think it's still Haldex, but I'm not sure. So I'd be really excited to test that thing and see how it compares to this. But thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up so the algorithm knows that we're doing a good job. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.